جاهزين? That's as much as Arabic you're going to get from this panel. This is meant to be an Arabic panel. It's going to be in English, but it's going to explore Arabic worlds. Right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name's Sabi. I'm the co-artistic director of this edition of the Contemporary Art Biennale. And I'm thrilled to be on a panel with Kayfa Ta that comprises of Ala Yunus and Maha Mamoon and Ruba Al-Sweel. And we're going to be exploring a topic quite dear to me, archives to algorithms. And we're going to be looking at media memory and making publics and what we mean by these. Now, initially this panel was kind of conceived in order to deep dive straight in the Arab world of digital media, but also how it intersects with literary media and archives. But because I'm not that expert, I'm going to start from the more widely circulating histories of print media, literature, digital media, and how now these get reread, rewritten, and rescripted from genealogies of Arab literature and Arab digital media. And I can't think of better people and colleagues to talk about these subjects through the projects that they have presented in this Biennale, both of which are new commissions, and we're going to talk about those. You can settle in the back seats. Okay, so the year is 1450. You probably have heard of the Gutenberg press. This is the first time in history that a certain kind of mechanization of language occurs through the machine, through the printing press. And what this does, it creates a mechanical, movable print type, which means that in this printing press, each letter is standardized. Each word, therefore, has to start getting standardized, and a certain kind of standardization of language has to occur in order to produce something that was widely circulating, a form of literature, which was the Bible. And so the first major publication that came out in 1455 was the Gutenberg Bible. Now, if we know European history, we also know that this was the time of the Renaissance, the so-called golden age of sorts of culture, painting, art, all of these things. And the Gutenberg Bible is considered almost revolutionary in terms of what kind of shifts it created in society and in the world because of this standardization of language, but also because once language gets standardized and once the Bible, which otherwise was in the hands of a few and read out, because only a few people would have access to the manuscripts that existed until then, and many people did not even have the literacy, it created a certain kind of hegemony of reading itself, of the reading public, and who has the authority over it. Now, this starts democratizing reading, printing, writing, publishing. And what that therefore does once the Gutenberg press happens is that obviously it does not have a monopoly of what kind of books get published. Many kinds of books start getting published. Many pamphlets start getting published. New literatures and new genres of literature start getting invented, right? I'm not going to go deep into that history, but what does it mean that to say new publics get formed? It means that perhaps new genres create new public spheres, new followers, and therefore new communities of writers and readers, right? It also means new circuits of media, new circuits of literature also start getting produced, creating sub-communities, subcultures. And so dominant culture that usually is more visible starts bifurcating and creating all kinds of other public spheres. An easy example of this is, say, the emergence of the novel as a genre. That this might be familiar to you. It used to get published. It actually didn't even start as a novel. The novel started as chapters of stories that get published in either weeklies or dailies that then start getting consolidated into the form of a novel. And once it's in the form of a novel, it creates a whole new public sphere as well as a genre of writers who want to create novels. Now, all of this is rather common knowledge, so I'm not saying anything enlightening about this. But among the topics that we'll touch on, and that's why I'm bringing this up, there's a certain kind of decentralization of the word that occurs. And yet at the same time, while there's a decentralization of the word, there's also a fixing of knowledge. and a fixing of knowledge from traditions of orality. What that easily suggests is that certain centers of publishing, certain centers of knowledge start getting consolidated into whose printed books matter more, which ones carry knowledge and science and have some level of authority. And so whereas traditions of orality also had their own hierarchies and also had certain kind of monopolies of who has control over knowledge and what is true and what is not, this kind of fixing of knowledge from a traditions of orality and ended up also considering, at least within the dominant models of European knowledge systems through universities, sciences, considering orality as something that is actually not reliable, because the printed and fixed word, the published word, is reliable knowledge, because if you only remain in the oral traditions, I think there's a reverb. In oral traditions, there's a reverb. So what happens is that the stories keep changing. It's a little bit like Chinese whispers. As the stories and literatures travel through people and communities and from one language to another, they keep adapting and taking on new colors. And as that happens, as we know, it becomes very unreliable what the true source of that story or knowledge was, because you can't pin down the author. You have to create a certain kind of author, and you have to create certain kinds of circuits that fix the author, the printed word, and that allow you to quote people, and that if someone is misquoted, they can be corrected. And of course, some of these have advantages. Something in the echo level increase. Maybe you can tone down the volume. So what all of this has been narrated is to say that there was a recoding of the relationship between aesthetics and the public with the printed word, right? Because there was a different appreciation or approach to aesthetics and the public in cultures of orality. Now, while a lot of people like to say that maybe with the print revolution, traditions of orality have slowly faded away, that's absolutely not true. Every culture still preserves traditions of orality. I mean, a good example of that would be, say, rumors or gossip. When you have rumors, what is a rumor? It is a statement without a source. Someone said, and that someone said can have a power over you, right? And that's really, I mean, the extreme version of the power or the misappropriation of power of orality. That who said what? And is this verifiable or not? Where are you quoting this from? Right? So there is something about aesthetics, and there's something about the public sphere and the making of publics. Now, fast forward to the digital age. We see an explosion of text. In fact, a lot of people say that people are not reading anymore in the digital age. But on the other hand, a lot of people also say that never before have so many people been reading and writing because of social media and Twitter, even if it's 160 characters, right? So there's a hyper mediated environment of text, reading and writing, and it's kind of disjointed writing because it's not the continuous form of a complete thought, a complete sentence. It's incomplete and broken sentences, incomplete and fragmented sentences and statements, which also then create an environment of, or a concept actually, that many thinkers have talked about, called hypertextuality. Now I'm going to be very simplistic about defining it. Say, when you're reading something and you find something interesting in that online, you click a hyperlink or you open another tab, and then you're down a rabbit hole. So basically, the continuity of a text is broken, but into an environment where the text is not one unified object. It, in fact, keeps multiplying and goes from one source to another, till the point that you're actually not reading a text, but a circuit of texts, an environment of text. Now, this is captured in the Biennale, in fact, in the works of Yazan Khalili, who you will see in the Hall of Chance, B2. Those strange apparatuses in which screens are displaying text and a hand is writing some of those texts. What happens in the digital age, although there's this explosion of text, writing, and reading, is that it kind of mixes up and really, if I can say, contaminates the differentiation between the text and the image. Images become text. You wear text on your t-shirts half the time, but they actually don't mean anything, and they serve as almost like images. But more than anything, they collapse. Think of a meme. A meme is like a rumor as well in the new age. It is a statement or an image without a source. It is an image and text. It is an image text, right? And so we're looking at a very different version of text and a very different version of the public sphere because of the digital age and the digital explosion. And what that does is something that actually a media theorist and film historian Walter Ang used to describe as we're in a new age of orality. Orality with an O. Because the text has gotten dislodged from its fixity. You can write a post and then you can change it the very next day. It's not fixed as it gets fixed in a book, right? And so what happens, say, in this massive shift from the printed word all the way to the digital word, is there's also something that Tariq Al-Aris, an amazing media theorist from Lebanon, describes as a collapsing of interiority. The novel took you into an interiority of an author or a character or to yourself. And in the digital age, you're in an age where the interiority-exteriority aspect is completely collapsed. Why? Because is your social media post a private statement or is it a public statement? And what does public even mean when you post something? And then when we look at what publishing means, the question we would ask is, what is the purpose of publishing? And that is to make public. To make public in two ways. Make public what you have written or what you have said or stated, but also make publics, right? And all of this is a circuitous path from an age of fixing things in the printed word. A strange genealogy of the text, all the way from the fixing of it in the printed word to the dislodging of it, the unfixing of it in the digital word, right? From an age of textuality to a strange age of text orality, right? And this is all, of course, within the dominant paradigm of Western media histories. It is not even looking at the regional ramifications of this, how the text, oral, and digital cultures and traditions get assimilated into culture. And that's the roundabout way to get to this panel, which is to say that we're looking at Kayfa Ta's project, which goes into the genealogies of digital culture in Arabic media. And we look at the very first Arabic computer. And so my first question is a rather basic one. Can you tell us about your project? And can you tell us about the history that you're trying to map? One thing that was fascinating in the project that Kayfa Ta presented is that it's conceived as a book that is yet to become a book. It is almost a deconstructed version of a book to become. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Ala and Maha to share a little bit about your project.
Thank you, Sabih. This is very loud. Maybe I'll take a step back to Kayfa Ta's beginnings. And so in terms of taking your lead and thinking about printing as creating publics, and so Ala and myself are artists and curators. And at some point we thought that we need to, that art needs to circulate a bit outside of the galleries that we were showing in, whether as artists or curators. And we thought that we need to exit these spaces and that the book would allow us to. To exit these spaces, we chose the format of how-to books, and this is where our title comes from. Kayfa Ta means how to. So it's a very popular genre that you find sold on the streets and all of that. And so we took this genre like a Trojan horse, and which is our logo. So it's a form through which we can pass other forms. So it's a how-to format through which we can, which in people's minds is a very easy, popular format where you learn things in a very simplified way. We use this as the coverage, the package through which to pass more experimental, reflective, sometimes poetic, sometimes practical, sometimes philosophical texts that do not necessarily follow the format 1, 2, 3, do this, do that. Sometimes it does, but it just starts with a question: how to disappear, how to learn how to know what's really happening. These are titles of our books. How to Speak Dead, which is one of our latest books. How to Live from Fire to Fire. So we started by inviting. We also thought, okay, we want to print in Arabic because we felt the essayistic form. Maybe we can add to that with writers whom we feel are also locked into the readership of art. So we invite artists and authors who we feel do not really have a presence in the mainstream as they should. They are kind of locked into a certain space with a certain audience. But we felt that actually they are very approachable and legible and of interest to a wider public. So, I need to take my breath. So we would, in a very kind of organic and intuitive way, we would say that, okay, this artist or this writer we feel have a sensitivity to the moment that we also share. We share their kind of initial kind of sensitivity, and we have a connection to their writing. So we approach them and ask them, what's a question that you would like to think about with a general audience? So that to also get these writers out of the kind of art speak or specialized speak, so that they should have in mind that they're addressing a bigger audience, because we want to create bigger publics. And these bigger publics are hybrid publics between the art public and the more mainstream public. So this is kind of how we started within print, okay, in the beginning, and within like the book form of monographs, each one a how-to question. This all started in 2012, and up until 2019, we were publishing these books, and then, but also exhibiting as artists and curators in the exhibition spaces. So these two were separate. These two worlds were separate up until 2019, when we first had our first exhibition that brought our publishing questions and interests into exhibition space. And since then, we've had several exhibitions through which we investigate histories of publishing, alternative histories of publishing, where art intersects with publishing, with a special interest on kind of broken histories of publishing in the region, forgotten kind of episodes, whether they were huge projects like Dar al-Fata al-Arabi's whole publishing project, and which lasted for decades, or other similar projects. So something that is that big to other lesser known ephemeral individual projects that maybe lasted one issue. So this would be, and the first kind of general title of our first few exhibitions were How to Reappear, which we used in this exhibition. We created and presented in different formats, but the idea was to bring back some attention to these gaps in our publishing history, and to reflect on them from the point of view of the present, and see what we can learn from them, give them due kind of space to think about. And this exhibition is like a second cycle in our exhibition research. So maybe I can start with one of the main projects, which is the Sakhr project.
Yeah, Thank you so much for also the introduction, which kind of puts our work in context. Yes. So the Bible indeed circulated much more democratically when it was printed, but further when it was translated into English, which is something that some people in power were opposing, because the type of gains that you can get from controlling type of content that can circulate. And it happened in the 1980s that a Kuwaiti entrepreneur was the agent, Mohammed al-Sharikh, was the agent who was selling the Atari devices in Kuwait, and figured that some of his customers would not know how to use Atari because they can't pass the first opening screen because it was in English and they didn't read English. So he went ahead and found a way to Arabize that interface. And so he was frequenting technology fairs and met Bill Gates and Nishi, who had just built the MSX computer, which later develops into, Microsoft Empire, and asks if this computer exists in Arabic or has plans to exist in Arabic in the future. And they say no. And so he says, I make it. And he goes back to Kuwait and starts to understand the challenge that he has put himself up to, which is basically he assembles a team of programmers and or people who might have interest in programming in the future. Like offers some training to them, hires some training for them and all of that. But that the main concept that he figures out, how do we put these Arabic language or linguists' work, such as Farahidi and Sibawayh, which are like historical figures in Arab culture, how do we put them inside the computer? And interestingly, he thought if we start with the Quran, if we try to put the Quran, such a holy text and something that does not accept or tolerate any mistakes inside the computer, then we can maybe produce like the perfect Arabic computer. And so the team works on that for many months and with the help of his wife as well, before they produce this special cartridge, besides, of course, the computer that they've Arabized the keyboard of. So they don't have to Arabize the whole construction of a computer, but rather the logic of that is operating the computer. And he brings it here to Saudi Arabia to meet the highest religious figure at the time, Ibn Baz. And Ibn Baz was blind, but nevertheless, he asked questions to the team that would, of course, ask it to the computer, and the computer answered very correctly. And he was very impressed to the point that he put his hands on the keyboard, because the keyboard was also the computer, and he said, إنه عمل خارق. It's an amazing work. This validation, of course, this is amazing because here you spoke about all the printing processes that were just about how we bringing all this orality into a printed form, and then the printed form is utilized to be re-entered into the computer, and then the testing of the computer is not nowhere near seeing. In fact, even this is just about the communication that can prove that it can test this test. It can stand this test. And so with this validation from the religious figure, training centers all across Saudi can be there with full of children, children, males and females, boys and girls, also a little bit older people. And they started also producing all these types of programs and cartridges besides making the computer. So you sell the computer. In fact, they sold 800,000 copy devices, but also like around 5 million programs, because once you have this basis, you can disseminate more content through it. And of course, they needed all these training centers, and then they needed all the training manuals, and it is also important to realize that this is content that was brought to a world that was also going through its Arabization processes of the type of things that are taught in school, all the sciences that are, of the 20th century translated one way or another. So it's coming like as part of a bigger package. So this edutainment feature of the computer was coming at an important time. And so there are images of children sitting next to their parents playing with these computers. It was all working together as a fantastic moment of crossing under or through a digital gate of sorts. So what we try to do here is basically to bring some of these stories that are very interesting to us as publishers, because that's about how we can speak to a general public, right? How can you build a product and multiply the outputs in a way that would continue, like have a continued relationship with the audience, and at the same time communicate the content or the level of content that you would like to have communicated through your project. And we have chosen 5 episodes from the different stories that were happening in Sharikh's experiment, and worked after writing these and producing all the visual references. We worked with Islam Shabana, who's an artist and a coder, also in Egypt, and he worked with the AI to build an environment or to create web applications with the AI, so that they mimic somehow the environment and the aesthetic of Sakhr. Nevertheless, of course, the AI does not ignore all the things that has happened since the 80s until today, and bring that, despite our choices, into the format that we have at the end. And we also thought that we want to also bring the computer itself into the display and the cartridges. And as we were talking to people about what we were doing, we realized how much of our friends and generations just like that are margining around our age had also worked with Sakhr and had so much fondness for the model, that you could trace something. We started to trace how some of its aesthetic appears in their work too. And so this primitive looking digital culture in its beginning, and the way it proliferate one way or another, becomes like the base or kind of some sort of a reference point that we can look all together onto and kind of understand some moment in the story of Arabic publishing, from which other types of stories appear in our installation, which we chose for it to have the title How to Publish. But from each project that is presented in this exhibition or in previous editions of our work, we're always looking to learn on how to create a better publishing project in its relationship from how we produce, how we design, how we speak to authors, to how audience feeds back again into the product.
Can you quickly? Can you quickly, before we move to Ruba, also just mention a little bit about the kinds of contributions you received to create this project? Because it wasn't just a Kayfa Ta solo project of research going in. And I think this kind of also subscribes to this kind of a P2P model that comes with digital age, that it's kind of decentered in that it's many kind of contributors that create this environment or this media platform. And you use that into your project as well. But very quickly before.
Very, very quickly. The popular format of the how-to manual basically showed us how many people feel they belong to our project, even if it's a 2-artist project. And then they could also suggest to us how to titles, and then cannot take all these titles. But we thought that the exhibition format could be an interesting place for, first of all, learning from others about the things they wanted to share with us, but also looking deeper into stories that interest us, and prompting or promoting thinking and working on publishing by commissioning works. And so we have lithographs by Aliyas, And when he describes the story to us, it's also about this, I think, early 17th century or late 17th century sometime, like German experimenter who kind of like by coincidence figures out how to print off a piece of stone. And stone is صخر in Arabic, and صخر is the name of the first computer. And we thought that this, something in the background can work with each other. And there is also the work of Karim Lutfi, who uses dated versions of Photoshop to create his art, because he thinks that these earlier Photoshop editions were more faithful to the pixel than what is happening in this like super elaborated versions that we have today. And some of his projects is basically that he was trying to write with JavaScript the word Allah in Kufic script, which we find also the subject or one of the cartridges that was sold by Sakhar is about this font that they also developed to have it on the screen, but also that has fascinated Asad Badawi. Also remembering how his father, a hobbyist programmer, worked with these manuals and was mesmerized by seeing Arabic letters on screen. And the font was Kufi. And so there are all these like stories that are just inside each other about how you can move from one story to another, while you still also talk about so many things in these stories. And we also have Firas Shahade with us, who lives on the internet and produces from the world of games what seems to be the future of some of the work that we have detected produced in the 60s about how do you create your own environment in the books that you publish inside your own region.
Yuala. So this is a kind of rewind of the history of circulation of a new technology or a new approach to technology, a new linguistic sphere of technology. Fast forward to the 21st century, we see the works of Ruba Al-Sweel and the kind of publics that have now already been created, and a kind of meltdown environment of the digital media, a meltdown of what it means to publish, a meltdown of the text environment, the text image and video, moving image. I mean, it's really, I see her video and it feels like there's a whole meltdown happening, but it's not just a meltdown. She mentions Frankensteins and demons, a sense of possession, and we don't know if the devices are possessed or are we possessed by the devices, which actually is not coincidental, because back in the day, we used to be possessed by books. If someone was a book, what do you call it? A bookworm. They used to be told, get out of your book and interact with us. And now everyone's a phone worm. Get out of your phone and interact with us, right? And so Ruba kind of taps into a completely new ecology of the digital media, which also is an ecology that is very swiftly stratified between generations. I mean, I sometimes teach in universities, and I realize that the digital environment I inhabit is completely different from the digital environment of students. And in these 10 years, those digital environments are multiplying. And clearly, the world Ruba inhabits and the world I inhabit, even if we might think we're kind of very close in age, are worlds apart. So maybe, Ruba, you can tell us a little bit about your work, and then we'll start having an intranet dialogue.
Thank you so much, Sabir. Thank you so much, Sabir. Yeah, I guess by way of framing, I'm a writer and a filmmaker, and a lot of my work explores these ideas of the plasticity of language, speaking of language and fixedness. So I write from this idea that language is plastic, it's subject to extreme tendencies of the present, and it's a symptom or as a symptom of a fertile ground, so it's never fixed. I have a few slides, if that's okay. So my work in the Diriyah Biennale this year, a new kind of commission, it's an extension of my interest in the economies and ontologies of scaled up technology, and specifically e-waste. So for me, consumer technology is a great way, or a kind of a great site for competing interests and ideologies. And I think situating my questions in this techno kind of material framework, or kind of rooting it in this material and the material conditions of global supply chains, is a really great way to trace or reveal the way the world works in a very Heideggerian way, as he wrote in one of his seminal essays, The Question Concerning Technology. And I think this framework is very relevant, where he says technology isn't merely a collection of tools, but rather a mode of revealing the world. So to kind of just explain the film a bit, it's a docufiction of a full story, of a full circle story of a phone that's stolen and resold. It speaks to the protagonist about its journey through the New Silk Road. So all the kind of how it was ferried through ports, what kind of factories it went through, who assembled it, and all of that. And I think putting the personal cell phone through this test, this technomaterial framework, really demystifies what it's like to live today and how we experience natural language in light of advanced technologies. And e-waste also functions as a critical site. And when I say e-waste, I don't only mean disused devices, although the full cycle of a device kind of reveals a lot about the way the world works, where it's assembled way before it's even an object, what kind of chemicals bring it together, down to who owns it and then where it ends up. And I think e-waste in this sense reveals and accelerates the externalities of digital infrastructures. And so when I say externalities, I kind of mean it in this economic sense, the kind of unintended costs and benefits of their economic activities that end up affecting us, the everyday users. So e-waste is, one of those things that are also a contested ground for kind of massive ideological and cultural wars, specifically rhetoric around end times, obviously, and kind of narratives about ecological collapse and how those threads are usually pulled or weaponized. So returning to language, in my film, I assign speech to the phone in this attempt to ventriloquize or animate the phone, and I kind of give it agency. And I think this writing exercise was not only, super fun to kind of think what the phone feels and thinks, but resulted in this language that feels very contemporary given our experience with LLMs. So it resulted in this kind of skitsed out language that sounds a lot like deep learning, and so the script is sort of narrated by this kind of indifferent. It sounds like it's narrated by this kind of indifferent AI egregore, and it plays like this more than human kind of stream of consciousness. And to me, I like this idea of this figure, this phone, as a civilizing trickster that reveals infrastructure and meaning or kind of truth as it ferries across borders. Obviously inspired a lot by Walter Benjamin's idea of the angel of history, where he describes kind of witnessing catastrophe from a distance, above piles and piles of like disused devices and digital detritus. So this disruptive figure, embodied in the hardware, in mythology, kind of plays as a crucial role in establishing infrastructure and society, and it narrates what it experiences through this strange tongue of machines, which is the title of the film, Machine Tongues. I think this is kind of core to my core to the way I wrote the script is understanding or writing the script from the perspective of a Lacanian framework on the idea of the voice versus speech. So he differentiates voice and speech. So speech is what assimilates into language. It's like what gets subsumed by the symbolic realm, but voice is more affect, or that haunting presence of what is not said. And so the phone is coming from this kind of voice, this affect. For me, this disembodied egregore emerges in that gap inside language. And I really kind of how the voice is characterized in Lacan's kind of thinking. It's this object that is external to the subject, in spite of being immanent or coming from the most intimate part of ourselves, which is like from the inside. It's like guttural, it's our voice. And I like the idea of linking this to the nature of our relationship with our phones that are literally extensions of our biology and consciousness. It's something that comes from the inside and it's projected outward. That's kind of it on language. There's more I could say, but we have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ruba. You can see the enormous jump from Sakhar to what Ruba is talking about. Because my intro was so long, I'm going to open the floor. I mean, I have so many questions to ask, but in the limited time we have, I can't urge you enough to see both the projects. Ruba's in B3 in the collective observation space, and Kayfa Ta's in Hall of Chance. Any questions from the audience? Pressing questions. We have one at the back.
Thank you so much for this very insightful panel. My question is to either Sabih or Ala, because you both mentioned that. So Sabih mentioned at the beginning that the Bible was the thing that was first tested by the typewriter, and then Ala mentioned that Quran was the first thing it was tested by computer sakhar as the epitome of language. And you can see that religion is some kind of a driver for this growth. Do you think that it still is, or is there something else that's taking over as well?
I have spoken too much, so I'm going to let Ala respond.
I think it still is. There's so much connection to we will see always the religious text or ideas present in every form of publishing, including internet forums. Faye has a fantastic project also inside our project. And we have also, like with Ahmad Mater, we know that he also includes in his future publication something about that. So there is that, but there's also other things. So it's not like the only, it can happen that in the past, that it was leading some way or leading the way for some technologies. It can also be related to the type or who had the power, who had the money to invest in these machines. We have to understand that there's a lot of advancing money into these technologies. But overall, the Sakhar project wasn't about creating text. He was trying to use, to think about, first of all, that the Arabic letter will exist in 5 types of sounds or vowels. And then at the same time, that if you make a mistake with the Quran, that is intolerable. So if at all, that will create a perfect model, or that will make everybody works towards the more perfect model. And he starts from that strength rather than for the goal of producing something religious, I feel. And if at all, I feel he was an Arabist. And there's also another project in our installation by Ali Al-Adawi and Nuruddin Ahmed about the archive that he has offered online of literary magazines, for which he chose none of them to be of political affiliation. He wanted them absolutely very cultural and very literary. And if you think about it, they are the base also of the knowledge from which, all this content is built. And the other, like other products that he was building, such as like the qamus or the dictionary or other products like, that they were building. So think of this as elements within, as strategies, the way we like to think about it also in Kayfa Ta, strategies for making something, for making a model and testing it and growing from there too.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that with Faye Ahmed and Ali Majnouni's project that we're showing in the exhibition, they are focusing on the period of internet forums, Arabic internet forums. So whereas this is about the fragmentation of language, right? So and about how writing was developed episodically. So so from like the press, the Gutenberg press, or testing Sakhr, starting it with the Quran. These are also like the most popular texts, right? They have a humongous readership. It's maybe the only book that millions of people read. So you start with the book that is a bestseller, right? So this is the first thing. And then comes the 80s, and then with Faye Ahmed and Ali Majnouni's project, they were seeing how the computer allowed for experimentation with language for writers who were never allowed to be writers or accepted as writers, or who didn't know they were writers, to start trying out things on these internet forums, receiving instant feedback, testing out things, and then building a readership that started printing these things at home, so without any intermediate, any kind of permission in the middle. And some of these things, styles or novels that were written online, later became published by official kind of publishing houses. So this whole cycle is an interesting cycle to explore, to learn more about, and yeah, I just wanted to add this about the project.
Thank you, Maha. One last question. Yes.
Test, test. I hope the reverb doesn't hurt your ears. All right, thank you. Hi, all. I have a question directed at Ruba. Now, looking at your work, I see a journey of a phone going from one end to another. But it seems like that at the internet age, we're at an age of globalization. It seems like every corner you have someone saying, you met me at a very Chinese time of my life. So it feels like slowly we're heading towards a distortion caused by bots, because they pick up these memes, they pick up this information, these pics, and somehow we're bombarded by the same old tactics that are pulled through by ad campaigns. But somehow, all that we're seeing lately is distortion of history. Someone's relying on, like, big, huge companies are using ChatGPT to reframe some narratives. Some even young legal assistants are using ChatGPT to pull out some information that is meant to be basic to their knowledge level. So what do you think? Looking at the journey of that phone, do you think we're heading towards a total destruction caused by globalization? Or are we heading towards nothingness?
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think that we are heading towards neo-orality, as Sabih touched on earlier. There's a line in my film where I say the algorithm is the site of knowing the world. I think we are, because we're in this neo-oral age, the only way to really experience the truth or reality is your algorithm. That is the site of your life. So yeah, I guess we just live in different bubbles of reality based on our algorithms. That is the truth.
Algorithms are also reacting to things that we're like, if we don't spend so much time on Instagram, it won't be so much advertised. They will just go somewhere else and advertise. So our overuse of something, making it successful, is also making way for control over us. And then we sit and say, oh, they do this to us. So I think, yeah, it runs both ways. We can just wait for things to happen.
You know, AI is such a rabbit hole. Like, immediately people have opinions, and it's a whole thing in itself. But I think generally in both of these projects that we're going to see in the Biennale, and you see different infrastructures of language. The book was one infrastructure of language. Speaking in this format is another infrastructure. And this infrastructure includes bodies, microphones, speakers, someone keeping time, a whole arrangement of things. So what are the infrastructures of language that also then start determining the infrastructures of truth? We're going through multiplicity of such infrastructures proliferating. And so it's an interesting time to see where all truth and language are being situated, rather than seeing one completely displace the other. And I know this one theorist, media theorist, gets quoted a lot here, and that's why I don't like to keep quoting him, but he said it very well. His name is Marshall McLuhan, and he said that every technology is both an extension of our capacities, but also an amputation. Everyone keeps talking about the extension of our capacities, that they enable us, they do something, but we're seeing in the AI age that it's also creating this big fear about the amputation. It will take over us and truth and language altogether. But then it's never one or the other. And in the Biennale also, we're always looking at not one or the other, but living with contradictions. And so when we're living with contradictions, what kind of sonic resonances do we make sense of? On that note, we're going to end this panel. Thank you very much.